All right. So this next portion is covering how do you get Xcode set up and use it for ECS 281. Now it's important that you guys upgrade your software to macOS Monterey, right? Sorry about that. That'll help you do the rest of this tutorial. macOS Monterey and beyond. So if you're watching this in like 2023, macOS Monterey or something after it should be fine. And if not, we'll put a correction in the YouTube description, or we'll put something on Piazza. Don't worry about it. So if you have not installed Xcode for some reason, there's an Xcode installation tutorial on Canvas. If you go to Files, Resources, Xcode installing using PDF, right? So just the sort of basic installation. And usage. Most of the tutorial is inspired by ECS 280. So if you go to this hyperlink, you can also take a look at how they do their tutorial. Obviously, our tutorial is slightly different because we have slightly different requirements as a class, but it's a good backup. So I'm going to walk you through the development for Project Zero, which is ungraded, and how I'd set everything up. Luckily for you, everything I say about Xcode will apply to both Apple Silicon ARM-based systems and Intel-based systems. Every single Mac, essentially. So let's go through this one. Okay. I'm going to create a new project. Command line tool. ECS 281 project 0 winter 2022. Okay. So I'm going to create a new project. So I've created a new project. Now I need to add and create whatever files, right? Now, if I want to add files, I go here, I can right click, you can hit new file or add files, right? You can do either one. But in this class, you want to download some project files from Canvas. You need the Xcode redirect, the spec, the make file, and you need to include the project identifier at the top of every file. All right, let's just do this step by step. So let's go to Project Zero. So Project Zero, the spec is right here, covers how to handle this, and the project identifier is also here, right? We have project identifier.txt, a helpful file that you can download and use. I'm going to download that right away. We also have the starter tar that you can open up and then use. Now, what else do I need? I need Xcode redirect and the make file. So if I go here, I go to resources. Xcode redirect is here. I can download it from there. And how do I get to the make file? Well, let's find the make file together. Oh, make file.txt. All right. So that's the make file, right? Now, let's process all these files. Right? So we've got in the set of files. Let's open up this tar. In ECS 281, we don't give you starter files like you did in 280 and 183. We do that a bit for labs and Project Zero. But mainly for projects, we'll just give you the, the spec, the project identifier, and you have to go and make everything else. So it's a big step up. So I want to point out a bunch of things. So makefile.txt, all right. So you want to open up makefile.txt and you want to get the makefile from GitLab. So here I go to GitLab. It's right here. Right. I'm going to download it. We also need the XCode redirect. So let's open up this XCode redirect.txt. And it's right here. So I'm going to go there. Go to XCode redirect.hpp. Download. All right. Now we have all the files we need. We want to move this into Project Zero Starter. Then remove this old one. Also, you want to rename the makefile to just be a makefile, not a text file. And if you want to make sure that this actually went through, what I recommend doing is popping up your terminal. And then going to that project, right, in the terminal. And then you can change it from there. Obviously, it's not here yet because we haven't added it to the project, right? But if we wanted to, so Project Zero Starter, right? It still says makefile.txt. So what you want to do, you want to rename the makefile, because macOS always is assuming the file extension, but you can force it by renaming the makefile and using the mv command. Now for ls, no, there's no .txt anymore. So that's important, right? It's sort of, yeah, now it says, okay, this is a make file. That's really important though. We've got Xcode redirect, project 0, simple r.txt. So now that we have all our files together, we've got Xcode redirect, project files, make file. Let's add it to the project and let's take it from there. Let's just see where we are here. Okay. Now let's go ahead and add all the files. Downloads, project 0 start. My mistake. Gonna delete that. Now let me add the right files. Okay. So now I'm gonna go ahead and add all the files. I'm gonna take out this main because we don't need it anymore, right? And I always recommend moving it to trash, not even removing the reference, because that can cause some issues. If you forget that you removed the reference, but you haven't deleted it, it's a whole headache. Yeah, so now we have to make sure, as I said before, we need to add the project identifier at the top of every file. And when I say every file, I really mean .h and .cpp files, not text files. The way you submit test cases in this class is through various text files. I don't mean that you have to put a project identifier in those. All right. So let's get our project identifier. So I have it here, all right? Now I can copy it and I can go and put it here. Now, let's just go through some Xcode setup, and then I'll talk about setting up Xcode redirect and make files. So whenever you do an Xcode project, you need to modify the targets. So you want to go to the project targets and sorry. Oh, yes, build phases and then compile sources, right? So now you want to make sure that your compile sources only include .cpp files, and in these CPP files, it only has one main function. And the make file is what we use to compile your code into an executable. So that's important there. You want to go to targets, build phases, compile sources. You can also change it just from this panel here, target membership, which I recommend doing. What's next? Yeah, so you may not encounter this issue. So project targets signing capabilities, you don't want to sign it and run it locally. This is mainly meant for iOS development, but we're not doing an iOS development here. It's just the data structures and algorithms class. You don't need to go this far. So you want to go to project targets, signing capabilities. Don't sign. You want to sign to run locally, sign to run locally, and everything's going to work. Yeah, that should be good to go. All right. So now we have to edit sort of the project settings. So you want to go here, edit scheme, and you want to go to run, and you want to go to options. So a couple things, right? So we use text files, we use IO a lot in this class. So it's important that your code is able to, your executable is able to find the text files you need, right? So instead of searching the entire computer, you can specify a custom working directory, and it'll only look in that directory. And you want to make sure that you include the directory where all your files are located. These are not where all my files are located. One second. Yeah, so these are where all my files are located, right? So I want to choose this location, and then Xcode will go and look for text files here. So that's really important. And it's going to make your life a lot easier when you're specifying input arguments to run. Now, this is diagnostic, so this will make debugging a little bit easier. You want to turn on address sanitizer and undefined behavior sanitizer. This will make it a little bit easier to catch bugs. It's not entirely necessary, but I highly recommend it. And now you want to edit scheme, and these are the arguments that are passed on launch. So for project 0, that's -m resize, and you want to get a text file as well, right? And this is redirecting the input into your executable. -m is a command line option. If you watch the project 0 tutorial, which I highly recommend you do, Dr. P explains this, right? So it's very important as I'm going through this setup. It might be even better to watch the project 0 tutorial before you go through this Xcode setup. So now you want to compile and run with the visual debugger. Before we can compile and run with the visual debugger, I want to explain Xcode redirect and make files. Let's start with Xcode redirect. So I already have Xcode redirect in my Xcode project. I want to include it here, right? So hashtag include Xcode redirect HPP. Okay. So I include it here, and then there's a couple things I need to do, right? You want to take out the const from the method signature. You want to, oh yeah, you want to call Xcode redirect, obviously, to use it. Basically, this is essential if you want to use IO in Xcode. And frankly, basically on the entirety of macOS. If you use Visual Studio Code without the special launch.json we give you, you have to use Xcode redirect as well. It's essentially for all of macOS. And you also need to include iOS-based sync with Studio false, and that speeds up IO dramatically. So all of these are sort of IO related. And And that's the sort of arc with Xcode redirect. Make sure you include it at the top here. Make sure you include it in the main function, and you should be good to go. Now, second part, makefiles. So makefiles are the mechanism we use to compile your code into an executable. But when we give you a default makefile, it's not filled out for you. You got to fill it out. So one of those parameters are unique name. So fill it out, unique name. Then you want to get identifier. Where's our identifier? It's given to us in the spec, right? So, and usually we give it to you in a text file as well. So here it is. And you want to change the executable. We'll tell you what executable it should be in the project spec. So those are the three things you must change. Now there's an optional thing you can change. So you can get the dependencies and then put it at the bottom, right? So if you scroll to the bottom here, there's actually a list of dependencies that you can include. Otherwise, the compiler will go and find it for you. But you can include it explicitly, and it'll make compilation times a little bit faster if you're only editing a couple of files. So let me copy this command. Just make sure I put it here as well. I think it was a little bit truncated. Sorry about that. Now, let me run this command. Okay. 1 second. Let me get to the Michigan computer science. Okay, so now I'm here in my file, in my local directory. I run this command to get the dependencies. That didn't work for some reason. 1 second. It's a lot. Okay. Yeah. So what I had before is fine. You don't want to include the the percent sign, whatever the official terminology is. So now we've got the dependencies, and I can include it right here. Obviously, I don't have to, but it'll make compilation a little bit faster for you if you're on an old computer, right? And let me just give you sort of the rundown of make commands. I do want all of you to watch this full tutorial, but I'm just going to give you the very basics. So we're in our local directory here. So if I run make, it'll compile the code into an executable, and then from that executable, I can run /project0 and run the code, right? Obviously, I haven't done project 0 yet, so that's why you don't see anything. Make debug creates a debug executable that you can use when debugging and when running valgrind and perf, which are two tools that we'll explain sort of later on, and I'll talk about at the end of the tutorial. Make ungraded will allow you to create a tar file that you can submit to the autograder that doesn't count towards your 3 submits per day limit, right? So you have 3 submits per day, but if let's say you just want to show your instructor, hey, this is what my project, this is where my project is right now. Here's my code. Well, a great way to do that is to run make ungraded, submit it to the autograder, and it won't count against you. And the instructor can pull it up and look at your code, right? It's a lot simpler than sharing your screen and moving up and down and switching between files. You honestly would probably get more help out of that because we could help you a lot more efficiently. So highly recommend every time you submit to the autograder, run make ungraded, submit to the autograder. All right, what's last? I think the last thing is make full submit. So if you run make full submit here, it will create a tar file, full submit tar.gz that you can submit to the autograder. All right. What is last? There's one more thing we have to do. Oh yeah, I'm going to compile and run it with a visual debugger and show you how to set breakpoints, etc. Give me 1 second while I fill out project 0. I'm just going to get the code from my original tutorial back then. Okay. All this checks out. So here's project 0 in its entirety. I highly recommend you watch the tutorial, by the way, and I will link to it as well. Yeah, so we have everything we want. We specified the input arguments, so the code will use these input arguments to run. And now let's fire up the code, just make sure it works. All right, build succeeded, good sign. Okay, yeah, it works. So let's say you have an issue and you want to debug it, right? Let's look at the get average function, whatever it is. Let's say there's some issue with this. You can set a breakpoint, right? And run the code. It'll stop at this line. And you can step over, step in, or you can hit the forward button. And you can observe how the data changes at each step. I find using a visual debugger is very important, especially because all the projects in this class are single-threaded programs. So using a debugger is quite easy as well. So yeah, if I hit forward, it'll just go onward. And many of you are already familiar with this part because you've used XCode before. So yeah, that's about all.